The Clone Wars raged across 1,000 systems. The Jedi were stretched thin. The Republic was bleeding resources faster than it could replace them. Entire sectors burned beneath the relentless conflict between clone armies and separatist droid legions. Across the galaxy, worlds that had once prospered now lived beneath the shadow of orbital bombardments and military occupations. Every hyperspace lane carried warships. Every holonet broadcast spoke of battles won or lost. Every decision made within the towering Senate rotunda on Coruscant seemed designed only to prolong a conflict that had already consumed millions of lives. Yet for all the destruction unleashed during the war, for all the secrets hidden within the Force, and for all the schemes carefully woven by Darth Sidious behind the scenes, there remained one possibility that no Jedi Master, no Sith Lord, and no military strategist had ever considered. Beyond the known frontiers of the galaxy, beyond the dangerous labyrinths of the unknown regions, beyond even the deepest reaches charted by explorers over thousands of years, something impossible was about to arrive. The Force binds all living things together, connecting stars, worlds, and civilizations through currents that few truly understand. Jedi spent their lives studying those currents. Sith sought to dominate them. Yet there are moments when events emerge from beyond the reach of prophecy itself. Moments when destiny collides with the unknown. This was one of those moments. Far from the core worlds and distant from every major battlefront of the Clone Wars, reality itself began to tear apart. If you want to see more characters, civilizations, and impossible worlds enter the Star Wars galaxy, make sure to like this video, share it with fellow Star Wars fans, comment below with the crossover scenario you want explored next, and most importantly subscribe to the channel so you never miss future Star Wars what-if stories. The Force may guide the future, but sometimes the greatest stories come from beyond its reach. Deep within the unknown regions, where navigational hazards made hyperspace travel nearly impossible and ancient mysteries slept among forgotten stars, a Chiss reconnaissance task force moved cautiously through the darkness. Their sleek warships advanced between drifting nebulae illuminated by pale blue starlight. The unknown regions had always been dangerous. Strange gravitational anomalies, unexplored civilizations, and unpredictable hyperspace routes had claimed countless explorers over the centuries. The Chiss ascendancy survived because it respected those dangers. Every mission was conducted with patience, discipline, and meticulous caution. That caution was precisely why Commander Thrawn's people noticed the anomaly before anyone else. The first reports seemed insignificant. Long-range sensor arrays detected unusual energy fluctuations emerging from an empty sector that should have contained nothing except scattered asteroid fields. At first the readings appeared to be equipment malfunctions. Sensor operators recalibrated their instruments repeatedly. The anomalies persisted. Energy levels increased. Gravitational distortions spread outward across surrounding systems. Navigation computers began generating contradictory data. Stars appeared to shift positions for fractions of a second before returning to normal. Within hours, every Chiss vessel in the region reported identical phenomena. Senior officers ordered further investigation. What they discovered defied explanation. The stars ahead appeared to bend. Not metaphorically. Physically. The fabric of space twisted as though invisible hands were pulling reality apart. Brilliant streaks of blue-white energy erupted across the void, stretching between distant stars like fractures spreading through glass. Waves of exotic radiation rolled outward in expanding rings. Entire sections of space shimmered and distorted. Veteran Chiss navigators who had spent decades charting the unknown regions stood speechless before their displays. Nothing in recorded galactic history resembled what they were witnessing. As the anomaly grew, nearby stars became obscured behind curtains of luminous energy. Vast storms of crackling light expanded across millions of kilometers. The darkness of space transformed into a swirling sea of electric blue and silver. Every sensor aboard the Chiss vessels registered overload warnings. Then reality broke. A colossal rupture exploded open across the void. The dimensional wound dwarfed entire planets. Blinding energy surged outward in every direction as space folded back upon itself. The rupture continued expanding until even experienced military officers struggled to comprehend its scale. It resembled neither hyperspace nor any known wormhole. It was something entirely different, something impossible. The Chiss fleet immediately transmitted emergency warnings to nearby sectors. No one received them. Communications collapsed beneath the surge of exotic energy. For several terrifying minutes, the rupture dominated the darkness alone. Then something emerged. At first, observers believed they were looking at an artificial moon. The object was enormous, far larger than any warship ever constructed by the Republic or Separatists. Its immense structure slowly materialized from the dimensional storm, revealing an elongated cylindrical station unlike anything recorded within galactic databases. Massive rotating sections extended from its central spine. Thousands of illuminated windows glowed against the darkness. Vast docking bays lined its outer hull. Arrays of communications systems, defensive emplacements, and habitation modules stretched for kilometers. The structure continued emerging, and emerging, and emerging. Only when the entire object became visible did the Chiss commanders finally grasp its scale. The station measured roughly 8 kilometers in length. It was not a vessel. It was a city, an entire civilization suspended in space. Silence spread across every bridge as officers stared at the impossible construct. No known government possessed technology matching its design philosophy. No recognizable language appeared on its hull. No transponder signals matched any galactic registry. Yet the station was clearly inhabited. Power readings flooded Chiss sensors. Life signs numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Industrial systems operated throughout its enormous framework. The station was alive, and it had arrived from somewhere beyond their galaxy. Inside the station itself, confusion reigned. Only moments earlier, Babylon 5 had existed within familiar space. Its command staff had been dealing with routine diplomatic disputes, commercial traffic, and the endless political tensions that accompanied life aboard the galaxy's largest neutral station. Then came the experiment. A series of unusual energy readings near a jump point had triggered alarms throughout the facility. Engineers scrambled to stabilize systems. Command personnel attempted to determine the source of the anomaly. Everything changed within seconds. Now unfamiliar stars surrounded them. Long-range sensors displayed astronomical formations that matched no known maps. Communications channels remained silent. Jump gate calculations failed repeatedly. Every attempt to establish contact with nearby worlds produced nothing. The realization spread rapidly through Babylon 5's command hierarchy. They were no longer home. Whatever force had carried them through the dimensional rupture had transported the entire station into an entirely different galaxy. Fear followed that realization. Then determination. Babylon 5 had survived wars, political crises, assassination attempts, and threats capable of destroying civilizations. Its people were accustomed to impossible situations. Panic solved nothing. Answers would come only through action. As technicians struggled to understand their circumstances, another alarming discovery emerged. Unknown vessels surrounded the station. Dozens of them. The sleek blue-gray warships maintained cautious distances while conducting extensive scans. Neither side understood the other. Neither side knew whether the encounter would become peaceful first contact or the beginning of a conflict. Back on Coruscant, thousands of light-years away, the first fragmented reports finally reached Republic intelligence. Most analysts dismissed them immediately. Strange sightings from the unknown regions appeared frequently. Explorers exaggerated discoveries. Traders spread rumors. Military officials had more pressing concerns. Entire armies were currently engaged across the galaxy. The Clone Wars consumed every available resource. Yet not everyone ignored the reports. Within the Jedi Temple, Master Yoda paused during meditation. The sensation arrived suddenly. A ripple. A disturbance unlike anything he had felt before. Not darkness. Not suffering. Not the familiar corruption of the Sith. Instead, it felt foreign, as though an entirely different current had entered the Force itself. The ancient Jedi opened his eyes. For a brief moment, Uncertainty crossed his features. Elsewhere within the Senate district, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine reviewed intelligence updates arriving from the frontier. Publicly, he displayed no concern. Privately, Darth Sidious studied every detail with growing interest. Unknown technologies. Unidentified structures. A massive station appearing from nowhere. Variables. Uncontrolled variables. And Sidious despised uncertainty. Far beyond Republic territory, the Chiss task force continued observing Babylon 5 while the station's command staff worked desperately to establish communication. Hours passed without incident. Scans continued. Data accumulated. Neither side fired a shot. Yet tension remained. Both civilizations understood the same fundamental truth. First contact could shape the future, or ignite catastrophe. Neither side knew that this single encounter would soon send shockwaves across the Clone Wars. Jedi Masters would debate its implications. Separatist leaders would seek opportunities within it. Smugglers, diplomats, spies, and Sith Lords would all become drawn toward the mysterious station from another galaxy. Because Babylon 5 represented more than an unexplained anomaly. It represented something the Star Wars galaxy had not seen in years. A place beyond the war. A place where enemies might meet without armies standing between them. A possibility dangerous enough to threaten everything Darth Sidious had spent decades building. And as the unfamiliar station drifted beneath alien stars while Chiss warships maintained their silent vigil, the first chapter of a new galactic era quietly began. The Clone Wars still dominated the galaxy. For now. But somewhere in the unknown regions, a city from another universe had appeared. And history had already started changing. The appearance of Babylon 5 in the unknown regions triggered consequences that spread through the galaxy far faster than anyone aboard the station had anticipated. During the first days after its arrival, confusion had dominated every interaction. Chiss patrol groups had circled the station cautiously while intelligence officers attempted to determine whether this impossible structure represented a hidden Republic weapon, a Separatist superproject, or some unknown civilization emerging from unexplored space. Yet as communications gradually stabilized and diplomatic channels opened, a far more complicated reality began to emerge. Babylon 5 was neither military fortress nor invasion fleet. It was something the Star Wars galaxy had not seen in generations. It was a place built specifically to prevent wars rather than fight them. That fact alone made nearly every major power suspicious. The Clone Wars had poisoned trust throughout the galaxy. Every government, corporation, military command, and intelligence agency assumed hidden motives behind every public action. Neutrality had become almost impossible. Entire star systems had been forced to choose sides between the Republic and the Separatists. Trade routes were divided by battle lines. Political loyalties shifted daily. Even worlds claiming neutrality often secretly supplied one faction or another. Against that backdrop, Babylon 5's declaration that it would serve all parties equally sounded less like idealism and more like deception. Commander Jeffrey Sinclair understood the skepticism immediately. From the observation dome high above the station, he watched stars unfamiliar to any Babylon 5 star chart drift beyond the transparent viewport. Chiss warships maintained distant surveillance positions while diplomatic traffic steadily increased. New vessels arrived almost every hour. Republic couriers, independent merchants, exploration ships, intelligence craft pretending not to be intelligence craft. Every major government wanted answers. Sinclair could hardly blame them. Only weeks earlier, Babylon 5 had existed in an entirely different reality. Now it floated inside a galaxy locked in one of the largest wars in its history. The station's original mission had always been ambitious. It had served as neutral ground where ancient rivals could meet without fear of attack. It had provided a place where diplomacy might succeed where fleets and armies had failed. The problem was that neutrality worked only when everyone respected it. This galaxy gave little indication that anyone would. The first major diplomatic delegation arrived from the Galactic Republic. 3 sleek consular-class cruisers emerged from hyperspace near the station, their red markings shining beneath distant starlight. Chiss sensors tracked every movement while Babylon 5's traffic control systems struggled to integrate unfamiliar vessel specifications into databases never designed for hyperspace-capable civilizations. As the Republic ships approached, thousands of station residents gathered near observation ports. They watched clone troopers disembark alongside senators, diplomats, security personnel, and Jedi representatives. Their white armor gleamed beneath station lighting. Their discipline immediately impressed station security officers. These soldiers moved with practiced efficiency that reminded many Earth Force veterans of elite military units. Yet something felt strange. Many Babylon 5 personnel quietly noticed that the clone troopers looked nearly identical. Their faces, their voices, their movements. It created an unsettling impression that lingered long after the Republic delegation entered the station. Among the arrivals walked Jedi Master Plo Koon and Jedi Knight Aayla Secura, chosen specifically because both possessed reputations for diplomacy and calm judgment. The Jedi Council had debated extensively before sending representatives. Some masters suspected a trap. Others sensed genuine mystery surrounding Babylon 5. The Force itself offered few answers. That uncertainty worried them more than any clear warning. As Plo Koon entered the station's massive central concourse, he immediately sensed thousands of emotions converging around him. Traders negotiated deals. Diplomats exchanged information. Travelers explored unfamiliar surroundings. Security officers monitored potential threats. It felt alive. Not merely occupied. Alive. The Jedi Master had visited countless worlds during centuries of service, but few places radiated such concentrated diversity. Humans walked beside species unknown to Republic records. Alien languages echoed through corridors. Unfamiliar technologies operated alongside systems that seemed strangely recognizable. Most importantly, no one appeared afraid. For a brief moment, Plo Koon experienced a feeling he had almost forgotten during the Clone Wars. Elsewhere aboard the station, another delegation arrived only hours later. The Separatists had come. Count Dooku himself did not attend. The former Jedi understood risk too well to enter unknown territory personally. Instead, he dispatched senior diplomatic representatives supported by heavily armed escorts. Their arrival immediately generated tension. Republic officials demanded security restrictions. Separatist representatives insisted upon equal treatment. Arguments erupted before negotiations even began. Commander Sinclair watched the situation unfold with growing concern. Already the war threatened to follow its participants onto the station. If Babylon 5 became merely another battlefield, its purpose would fail before it truly began. The solution emerged from an unlikely source. Delenn, the Minbari ambassador, had spent years navigating conflicts among civilizations that often hated one another. She understood the psychology of diplomacy better than almost anyone aboard the station. Her recommendation was simple: absolute equality. Every faction would receive identical treatment. Every delegation would possess identical protections. Every negotiation would occur under identical conditions. No exceptions. The policy immediately angered nearly everyone, which, Delenn pointed out, suggested it was probably fair. Within days, Babylon 5 officially declared itself neutral territory. The announcement spread throughout the galaxy with astonishing speed. Republic news networks covered the declaration extensively. Separatist media questioned its legitimacy. Independent systems expressed cautious optimism. Meanwhile, smugglers, merchants, and corporate interests recognized opportunities immediately. A place existed where both sides could potentially meet without immediate violence. Such a location possessed enormous value. Not everyone welcomed the development. On Coruscant, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine reviewed intelligence reports regarding Babylon 5 with carefully concealed concern. Publicly, the station appeared harmless. Privately, it represented something dangerous. Not militarily. Politically. The Clone Wars depended upon division. Escalation. Every battle pushed the Republic closer toward accepting stronger centralized authority. Every crisis increased Palpatine's influence. Babylon 5 threatened that process by offering an alternative: dialogue, negotiation, understanding. The Sith Lord had spent years ensuring such concepts failed whenever possible. Now an entire station existed for the sole purpose of making them succeed. That could not be ignored. Yet direct action remained impossible. Destroying Babylon 5 would raise too many questions. Supporting it carried obvious risks. For the moment, observation seemed wiser. Palpatine would wait. He would learn. Then he would decide. Far away within Separatist territory, Count Dooku reached similar conclusions. Unlike Palpatine, however, Dooku found Babylon 5 fascinating. The station represented a variable beyond Sith planning. A truly independent power. Perhaps even a useful one. If carefully manipulated, Babylon 5 might become a platform for exposing Republic corruption while legitimizing Separatist grievances. At minimum, it offered opportunities. At maximum, it might alter the entire war. The former Jedi intended to discover which. Back aboard the station, the consequences of neutrality continued expanding. Trade agreements emerged. Prisoner exchanges occurred. Humanitarian discussions began. Worlds devastated by warfare found representatives willing to speak openly for the first time in years. The process remained fragile. Arguments frequently erupted. Accusations flew daily. Security officers intervened more than they preferred. Yet despite everything, people continued talking. That alone represented progress. For ordinary residents of Babylon 5, the transformation proved extraordinary. The station had always hosted diverse populations, but the arrival of Star Wars civilizations elevated that diversity to unimaginable levels. Clone officers shared meals with Minbari warriors. Republic merchants negotiated with Narn traders. Twi'lek diplomats exchanged cultural knowledge with Centauri nobles. Astromech droids fascinated technicians. Protocol droids fascinated absolutely everyone. Entire sectors of the station became crowded with visitors eager to learn about technologies, histories, and cultures previously unknown. Not every interaction proceeded peacefully. Some ended in fistfights. Others ended in diplomatic incidents. A few nearly triggered international crises. Yet even those conflicts usually concluded with discussion rather than violence. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Babylon 5 began influencing the galaxy around it. Jedi visitors noticed it first. Many arrived expecting another political battlefield. Instead, they discovered something resembling the ideals the Republic claimed to represent. A place where dialogue mattered. A place where species cooperated despite profound differences. A place where conflict was not inevitable. For younger Jedi especially, the experience proved eye-opening. The Clone Wars had defined their entire careers. Many had never known a galaxy without constant warfare. Babylon 5 offered a glimpse of another possibility. Master Plo Koon spent weeks observing station operations. What he witnessed troubled and inspired him simultaneously. The station succeeded not because its inhabitants agreed. They succeeded because they remained willing to disagree peacefully. Such a distinction seemed obvious. Yet throughout the Republic, it had largely been forgotten. The realization lingered in his thoughts long after diplomatic meetings ended. The Force itself seemed calmer aboard Babylon 5. Not absent. Different. The station lacked the enormous concentrations of fear and suffering common throughout war zones. That difference allowed subtle perceptions long drowned beneath the chaos of conflict. Some Jedi began wondering whether the war had blinded them to solutions hiding in plain sight. Elsewhere, more dangerous observers reached their own conclusions. Criminal syndicates recognized Babylon 5's strategic importance almost immediately. The Hutt cartels sent representatives. Black Sun dispatched operatives. Independent smugglers established new routes connecting the station to major trade networks. Neutral territory created economic opportunities impossible elsewhere. Legitimate businesses arrived first. Less legitimate enterprises followed quickly behind. Security challenges multiplied accordingly. Garibaldi found himself managing increasingly complicated investigations involving smugglers, spies, corporate agents, bounty hunters, and intelligence operatives from half a dozen governments. Every major power wanted influence aboard the station. Some pursued it openly. Others preferred secrecy. Either way, Babylon 5 grew more important each week. The station had arrived accidentally. Now it was becoming indispensable. Perhaps the clearest sign of its impact emerged several months after first contact. A major Republic convoy and a Separatist humanitarian fleet entered Babylon 5 space simultaneously. Under normal circumstances, battle would have erupted immediately. Instead, both groups docked peacefully. Representatives met. Negotiations followed. Aid shipments reached civilians trapped between battle lines. No one achieved total victory. No one completely trusted one another. Yet lives were saved. Thousands of them. News of the event spread rapidly across the galaxy. Some hailed it as proof that cooperation remained possible. Others condemned it as weakness. The debate intensified existing political divisions. But regardless of opinion, no one could deny reality. Babylon 5 had accomplished something the Clone Wars rarely allowed. It had produced a result benefiting ordinary people rather than military objectives. That success carried consequences far beyond a single operation. On distant worlds, populations exhausted by war began paying attention. Governments previously silent started asking questions. Senators wondered whether endless conflict truly remained necessary. Military commanders worried about shifting public sentiment. The station's influence extended further than anyone had predicted. Even Sinclair occasionally struggled to comprehend what Babylon 5 had become. Originally designed as a neutral meeting place between civilizations, it now occupied a central position within one of the largest political crises in galactic history. The responsibility felt immense. So did the danger. Because neutrality created enemies as easily as allies. Every success threatened individuals who benefited from continued warfare. Every agreement undermined those profiting from division. The station stood balanced between hope and catastrophe. One mistake could destroy everything. Yet despite the risks, Babylon 5 endured. Republic delegates continued arriving. Separatist representatives kept returning. Independent worlds sought membership. Trade expanded. Diplomacy evolved. For the first time since the Clone Wars began, a location existed where enemies could meet without immediately reaching for weapons. The significance of that achievement resonated throughout the galaxy. Some viewed Babylon 5 as a miracle. Others considered it a threat. Many regarded it as both. And as larger powers quietly maneuvered around this unexpected new player, one truth became increasingly impossible to ignore. The station from another galaxy was no longer merely an observer of the Clone Wars. It was beginning to change them. The success of Babylon 5's neutrality created consequences far beyond diplomacy. What had begun as a mysterious station emerging from a dimensional rupture was rapidly evolving into something much more significant. It was becoming a crossroads not merely for governments and military powers, but for ideas. The Clone Wars had consumed so much of the galaxy's attention that entire generations had grown accustomed to viewing every issue through the lens of conflict. Republic officials saw security concerns. Separatists saw political opportunities. Military commanders saw strategic calculations. Yet among the thousands arriving aboard Babylon 5, there existed another group whose interests extended beyond territory and warfare. The Jedi Order had come seeking answers, and what they discovered aboard the station would challenge assumptions that had guided them for centuries. The first signs appeared subtly. Jedi visitors initially approached Babylon 5 as they would any unfamiliar culture. They observed customs, studied histories, and evaluated potential risks to galactic stability. Such investigations were standard procedure. Throughout their long history, the Jedi had encountered countless species, religions, and philosophical traditions. Most possessed beliefs that differed from the teachings of the Force, but rarely did those differences create serious intellectual challenges. The Jedi generally found that alternative perspectives ultimately reinforced truths they already understood. The Force remained the Force regardless of what name another culture assigned to it. Babylon 5, however, introduced something entirely different. The station itself functioned as a gathering place for civilizations that possessed radically different understandings of existence. Some species viewed destiny as an illusion. Others believed fate governed every living thing. Some embraced spirituality. Others trusted only reason and empirical observation. Many held beliefs that seemed contradictory, yet somehow managed to coexist without descending into endless conflict. For Jedi raised within the traditions of the Order, the experience proved unexpectedly unsettling. Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi arrived aboard Babylon 5 several weeks after the station's formal recognition by the Republic. Officially, his mission involved diplomatic observation and maintaining communication between Babylon 5 authorities and Coruscant. Unofficially, the Jedi Council hoped one of their most respected negotiators might uncover deeper truths regarding the station's origins. The moment Obi-Wan stepped into the station's central concourse, he sensed something unusual. Not danger. Not darkness. Difference. The Force flowed through Babylon 5 just as it flowed through every living thing. Yet the people inhabiting the station related to existence in ways that felt fundamentally unfamiliar. Thousands of minds moved around him. Thousands of beliefs. Thousands of perspectives. The sheer diversity created an atmosphere unlike anything he had experienced elsewhere in the galaxy. Coruscant contained countless cultures, but all existed within a framework shaped by the Republic. Babylon 5 felt different. It possessed no dominant worldview. No central doctrine. No universal philosophy. The station existed as a living conversation between civilizations. That realization fascinated him. It also made him uncomfortable. The Jedi Order had spent millennia refining its understanding of the Force. Their teachings provided structure, discipline, and purpose. Yet as Obi-Wan met diplomats, scholars, religious leaders, and explorers from entirely different realities, he found himself confronting questions he had never considered. One of his earliest encounters occurred with Delenn. The Minbari ambassador had already gained a reputation among visiting Jedi as an individual possessing remarkable wisdom. Though not Force-sensitive in any conventional sense, she carried herself with a calm certainty that reminded many Jedi of their most respected masters. Their first conversation lasted hours. What began as diplomatic courtesy gradually evolved into philosophical exploration. Delenn spoke of balance. Not the balance pursued by Jedi teachings. A different kind. She described a universe shaped by cycles of growth and decline, order and chaos, light and darkness. Unlike the Jedi, who viewed darkness as something to resist, Minbari traditions often emphasized understanding opposing forces rather than simply rejecting them. Obi-Wan found the distinction intriguing. The Jedi taught mastery through control. Delenn described wisdom through comprehension. Neither philosophy seemed inherently wrong. Yet they approached identical questions from radically different directions. As their discussion continued, Obi-Wan became increasingly aware that many assumptions he considered self-evident appeared far less certain when examined from another perspective. Elsewhere aboard the station, other Jedi experienced similar revelations. Aayla Secura spent considerable time interacting with Babylon 5's civilian populations. Unlike diplomats and military leaders, ordinary residents often discussed philosophical matters with remarkable openness. Many seemed puzzled by core aspects of Jedi doctrine. The prohibition against attachment generated particular confusion. To countless cultures represented aboard the station, emotional connections were considered essential components of personal growth. Friendship, family, loyalty. These bonds were not viewed as obstacles to wisdom but as pathways toward understanding. Aayla had defended Jedi teachings countless times throughout her life. She understood the dangers attachment could create. Fear of loss often led individuals toward destructive choices. Yet as she listened to perspectives from dozens of civilizations, she found herself acknowledging uncomfortable truths. Many of the wisest individuals she encountered possessed deep emotional connections. Many demonstrated extraordinary compassion precisely because they allowed themselves to care. The contradiction lingered in her thoughts long after conversations ended. For younger Jedi, the experience proved even more transformative. Several knights and Padawans assigned to diplomatic observation began attending lectures hosted by Babylon 5 scholars. These events covered everything from history and politics to theology and metaphysics. The discussions quickly became popular, not because participants agreed, because they disagreed intelligently. The Clone Wars had created an environment where opposing viewpoints often became enemies. Babylon 5 encouraged something different: debate, questions, curiosity. Ideas could clash without people doing the same. Many Jedi found that concept refreshing. Others found it deeply unsettling. The strongest challenge emerged from an unexpected source: a gathering organized by scholars seeking to compare different understandings of destiny. Representatives from numerous civilizations participated. Among them were Jedi observers. The discussion centered upon a deceptively simple question: was the future fixed? The Jedi possessed complex views regarding destiny. Through the Force, they occasionally glimpsed possible futures. Such visions suggested certain events might be inevitable. Yet Jedi teachings also emphasized choice and personal responsibility. The balance between those ideas remained difficult to define. Babylon 5's participants offered dramatically different interpretations. Some believed destiny governed every aspect of existence. Others rejected fate entirely. Several argued that both perspectives contained elements of truth. Hours passed as theories collided. Historical examples were examined. Philosophical assumptions were challenged. Intellectual boundaries stretched. By the discussion's conclusion, many participants remained unconvinced by opposing arguments. Yet almost everyone left with a deeper appreciation for perspectives beyond their own. The Jedi present found the experience particularly significant. For years, the Clone Wars had narrowed their focus. Military responsibilities consumed attention previously devoted to contemplation and study. Babylon 5 forced them to think again. Not as generals. Not as warriors. As seekers of knowledge. The effect gradually spread throughout the Order. Reports sent back to Coruscant described unusual observations. The station encouraged dialogue rather than certainty. Questions rather than conclusions. Several council members welcomed these developments. Others expressed concern. Mace Windu reviewed numerous accounts with growing unease. The Jedi Order already faced unprecedented challenges. War strained resources. Political pressures increased daily. The Force itself felt clouded and uncertain. Introducing additional philosophical complexity might create confusion when clarity was desperately needed. Yet Master Yoda viewed the situation differently. The ancient Jedi listened carefully as visiting knights described their experiences aboard Babylon 5. He sensed no corruption, no dangerous influence, only learning. And learning, he believed, should never be feared. Even so, Yoda recognized something deeper occurring beneath the surface. Babylon 5 was not changing Jedi beliefs directly. It was changing how Jedi examined those beliefs. The distinction mattered enormously. For centuries, the Order had operated within relatively familiar intellectual boundaries. Alternative philosophies existed, but few possessed sufficient credibility or diversity to challenge foundational assumptions. Babylon 5 represented something unprecedented. A meeting place between entirely different realities. Entirely different histories. Entirely different understandings of existence. The opportunities were extraordinary. So were the risks. Not everyone welcomed such exploration. Certain Jedi became frustrated by endless debates that produced no definitive answers. Some argued that excessive questioning weakened conviction. Others worried that exposure to incompatible philosophies might erode discipline. These concerns intensified as discussions continued. Yet despite disagreements, participation increased. Curiosity proved difficult to suppress. The Force itself seemed to encourage investigation. Obi-Wan noticed the phenomenon repeatedly. Each conversation generated new questions. Each answer revealed additional mysteries. The process reminded him why he had joined the Jedi Order in the first place. Not merely to fight evil, to understand the galaxy. Some of the most memorable exchanges occurred with individuals possessing no connection to mystical traditions whatsoever. scientists, engineers, historians. Many approached existence through reason rather than spirituality. Their perspectives often contradicted Jedi assumptions completely. Yet they still managed to construct meaningful lives guided by ethics, purpose, and compassion. The realization forced many Jedi to reconsider the relationship between wisdom and belief. Perhaps understanding required more than certainty. Perhaps growth required uncertainty as well. Meanwhile, beyond public discussions and diplomatic gatherings, deeper currents moved through the station. Certain individuals sensed implications others overlooked. Delenn recognized that Babylon 5's greatest influence might not be political. It might be philosophical. The Clone Wars had trapped countless civilizations within cycles of fear and division. Military victories rarely changed underlying assumptions. Ideas did. If Jedi, politicians, soldiers, and citizens learned to view old problems through new perspectives, the consequences could prove transformative. Or destabilizing. Possibly both. The station itself seemed to encourage such possibilities. Every corridor connected cultures. Every marketplace mixed traditions. Every diplomatic conference exposed participants to unfamiliar viewpoints. Isolation became impossible. And isolation, many realized, had allowed assumptions to harden into unquestioned truths. As months passed, reports from Babylon 5 accumulated within Jedi archives. Some described cultural observations. Others analyzed philosophical debates. Several focused upon practical applications for diplomacy and conflict resolution. Collectively, they painted a picture unlike anything the Council expected. The station had become more than neutral territory. It had become a place where certainty encountered challenge. Where traditions encountered alternatives. Where wisdom encountered humility. For Jedi living through one of the darkest periods in galactic history, that experience carried profound significance. Not because it provided answers. Because it reminded them how important questions remained. Far away, hidden within the highest chambers of Coruscant, Darth Sidious monitored these developments carefully. The Sith Lord cared little for philosophical discussions. Yet he understood power. Ideas possessed power. Especially ideas encouraging independent thought. The Clone Wars relied upon division, fear, and increasingly rigid loyalties. Babylon 5 encouraged something else. Understanding. Perspective. Nuance. Such concepts threatened carefully constructed narratives. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But over time. And time, Sidious knew, often determined the fate of empires. For now, however, the station continued its work. Diplomats negotiated. Merchants traded. Soldiers rested. Scholars debated. And Jedi wandered among civilizations unlike any they had ever encountered, discovering that the greatest mysteries aboard Babylon 5 were not hidden within its technology or origins. They were hidden within ideas. Ideas capable of reshaping how an entire generation understood conflict, destiny, and the Force itself. And as those ideas spread quietly through the galaxy, the future became just a little less certain than anyone had imagined. Count Dooku had spent years studying power in all its forms. Before becoming the public face of the Separatist alliance, he had been one of the Jedi Order's most respected masters. Before that, he had been a student fascinated by history, politics, and the recurring failures that seemed to plague every generation of galactic civilization. Few beings alive understood the Republic's weaknesses better than Dooku. Fewer still understood the ambitions of Darth Sidious. Yet as reports from Babylon 5 accumulated across Separatist intelligence networks, Dooku began to recognize something that even his Sith master might not fully appreciate. The station from another galaxy represented more than a diplomatic curiosity. It represented an opportunity unlike any that had appeared since the beginning of the Clone Wars. The realization emerged gradually as intelligence analysts delivered increasingly detailed reports from Babylon 5. At first, Dooku viewed the station through a purely strategic lens. Neutral territory positioned beyond the influence of both Republic and Separatist military commands offered obvious advantages. Diplomatic meetings could occur without immediate violence. Information could flow across political boundaries. Trade networks could develop independent of wartime restrictions. Such developments interested him, but they did not yet command his full attention. What truly captured his interest were the subtle political effects radiating outward from the station. Again and again, reports described the same phenomenon. Representatives who arrived expecting confrontation often departed with greater understanding of their rivals. Political enemies spoke to one another. Military officers exchanged perspectives. Civilian populations exposed to Babylon 5's example began questioning assumptions that had previously gone unchallenged. The station was not ending the Clone Wars. It was doing something potentially more dangerous. It was encouraging people to think beyond them. Dooku found that deeply intriguing. From his residence aboard a luxurious Separatist command vessel, he spent long evenings reviewing transmissions gathered from spies operating within Babylon 5. Holographic recordings displayed debates between diplomats, negotiations involving independent systems, and philosophical discussions attended by Jedi observers. Most military leaders would have dismissed such material as irrelevant. Dooku saw something else entirely. Ideas possessed power. Narratives shaped civilizations. Entire governments rose and fell based upon which stories people chose to believe. And for the first time since the war began, an alternative story was emerging. The Republic insisted that victory over the Separatists would restore peace. The Separatists claimed independence was the only path toward justice. Babylon 5 suggested both narratives might be incomplete. That possibility threatened everyone invested in the continuation of conflict, including, perhaps, Darth Sidious himself. The thought lingered in Dooku's mind longer than he cared to admit. For years he had served his Sith master faithfully. He believed the Republic was corrupt beyond redemption. He believed dramatic transformation remained necessary. Yet the closer the Clone Wars moved toward their apparent conclusion, the more questions began surfacing beneath the surface of his loyalty. Certain events no longer aligned perfectly with expectations. Certain decisions made by Sidious seemed designed less to secure victory and more to maximize suffering. Entire campaigns appeared structured to prolong conflict rather than resolve it. Dooku was too intelligent to ignore such inconsistencies indefinitely. Babylon 5 amplified those doubts. Because unlike the Republic or the Separatists, the station operated outside Sidious's influence. At least for now. That independence gave it enormous value. If carefully cultivated, Babylon 5 might become a source of information unavailable anywhere else in the galaxy. Its leaders interacted with governments from multiple realities. Its diplomats possessed no loyalty to Republic institutions. Its administrators answered to no galactic authority. Most importantly, they had already demonstrated a willingness to challenge accepted assumptions. Dooku respected that quality. He understood its potential. Rather than approach Babylon 5 publicly, he chose a more subtle strategy. Officially, Separatist representatives continued participating in diplomatic initiatives hosted aboard the station. Public statements praised neutrality while emphasizing the alliance's commitment to peaceful dialogue whenever possible. Such declarations generated favorable publicity but accomplished little beyond appearances. Privately, however, Dooku initiated a far more ambitious effort. Trusted intermediaries began establishing discreet relationships with key individuals throughout the station's leadership structure. These contacts were not instructed to manipulate or coerce. Dooku understood such tactics would fail quickly among experienced diplomats. Instead, they were directed to listen, to learn, to identify shared concerns regarding the growing instability consuming the galaxy. The results exceeded expectations. Many Babylon 5 officials expressed genuine concern regarding the Clone Wars. They observed increasing militarization on both sides. They questioned the sustainability of endless conflict. Some privately worried that larger forces might be guiding events toward outcomes no ordinary political process could explain. Those observations immediately caught Dooku's attention, not because they confirmed his suspicions, because they emerged independently. People entirely removed from galactic politics were reaching conclusions remarkably similar to his own. That fact was difficult to ignore. Meanwhile, Babylon 5's leadership gradually became aware of Dooku's interest. Commander Sinclair received intelligence reports indicating unusual levels of Separatist engagement. Nothing overtly threatening appeared. No military operations. No espionage campaigns targeting station infrastructure. Yet Count Dooku's representatives consistently sought deeper access than ordinary diplomatic protocol required. The pattern raised questions. Sinclair had dealt with politicians throughout his career. He recognized when someone pursued objectives beyond official explanations. The challenge lay in determining what those objectives might be. Delenn possessed her own theories. The Minbari ambassador viewed Dooku with cautious curiosity. Unlike many Republic officials, who regarded him simply as a villain, she recognized complexity beneath the public image. Historical records painted a picture of a former idealist who had grown disillusioned with institutional failures. Such individuals could become dangerous. They could also become surprisingly honest when confronted with uncomfortable truths. Either possibility warranted attention. As months passed, Dooku's interest evolved into something increasingly personal. Rather than relying solely upon intermediaries, he began attending certain diplomatic functions hosted aboard Babylon 5. Security concerns prevented extended visits, but his appearances generated immediate interest. Jedi observers watched carefully. Republic delegates expressed suspicion. Journalists speculated endlessly regarding his intentions. Dooku encouraged the uncertainty. It created opportunities. During one notable visit, he participated in a private discussion involving diplomats from multiple civilizations. The topic centered upon governance and the relationship between authority and legitimacy. Most participants expected predictable political arguments. Instead, Dooku offered observations that surprised nearly everyone present. He spoke openly about corruption within the Republic. Not as propaganda. As analysis. He acknowledged flaws within the Separatist movement. He questioned whether military victory alone could resolve underlying grievances dividing the galaxy. Most unexpectedly, he suggested that institutions often become threats to their founding principles when left unchallenged for too long. The remarks generated extensive debate. They also attracted attention from individuals already questioning official narratives. Several Babylon 5 leaders left the meeting with altered perceptions of the Separatist leader. They still distrusted him. But they no longer viewed him as simple. That distinction mattered. Elsewhere aboard the station, Jedi representatives monitored these developments with growing concern. Obi-Wan Kenobi, in particular, recognized the danger Dooku posed. His former master possessed extraordinary intelligence and charisma. He could make almost any argument sound reasonable. Worse still, many of his criticisms contained elements of truth. That combination made him uniquely persuasive. Obi-Wan worried less about direct manipulation than ideological influence. Babylon 5 thrived upon open discussion. Dooku excelled within such environments. The possibility that he might shape emerging political currents could not be dismissed. Yet despite those concerns, attempts to restrict his participation proved impossible. The station's neutrality demanded equal treatment. That principle remained one of Babylon 5's greatest strengths. And one of its greatest vulnerabilities. Dooku understood both realities perfectly. As his involvement deepened, another objective gradually emerged. Information. Not military intelligence. Not fleet deployments. Knowledge. The Count became increasingly fascinated by the station's unique position between realities. Babylon 5 contained historians, philosophers, diplomats, and scholars possessing perspectives unavailable anywhere within the Star Wars galaxy. Their understanding of political collapse, authoritarian movements, and civilizational transformation often paralleled events unfolding within the Republic in unsettling ways. Some described historical figures whose rise resembled Chancellor Palpatine's growing accumulation of authority. Others discussed patterns common among societies transitioning from democracy toward centralized control. None possessed direct knowledge of Sidious. Yet collectively, their observations illuminated possibilities Dooku could not ignore. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that hidden forces shaped the Clone Wars far beyond ordinary politics. For the first time in years, Count Dooku began actively investigating his own master's long-term objectives. That decision carried enormous consequences. Unknown to most observers, a subtle game had begun. Dooku sought truth. Sidious sought control. Babylon 5 stood between them. Neither side fully understood how significant the station might become. Yet both increasingly recognized its importance. Far above the diplomatic chambers and bustling marketplaces, the station continued serving its original purpose. Negotiations proceeded. Trade expanded. Philosophical discussions flourished. Most residents remained unaware that one of the galaxy's most dangerous individuals had begun viewing Babylon 5 not merely as neutral territory, but as a potential weapon against forces hidden at the highest levels of power. Whether that weapon would ultimately expose the truth or accelerate disaster remained impossible to determine. But one thing was becoming clear. Count Dooku had stopped looking at Babylon 5 as a battlefield to influence. He had begun looking at it as a key to a mystery. And mysteries had a habit of changing destinies. Babylon 5 had never intended to become the center of the Clone Wars. The station's leadership had envisioned something far different when they first emerged into an unfamiliar galaxy. They had imagined cautious diplomacy, scientific exchanges, and the gradual construction of trust between civilizations that knew nothing about one another. Instead, only months after their arrival, the station found itself suspended above a growing storm of secrets. Every major power in the galaxy now maintained some form of presence aboard Babylon 5. Republic diplomats occupied entire embassy wings. Separatist representatives moved through the corridors beneath constant surveillance. Chiss observers quietly monitored events from behind carefully neutral smiles. Trade guilds, independent merchants, explorers, smugglers, and intelligence agents filled the station's markets and council chambers. The station had become what no world in the Star Wars galaxy had successfully managed during the Clone Wars, a place where enemies occupied the same territory without immediately resorting to violence. That fragile neutrality, however, created opportunities far more dangerous than open warfare. Michael Garibaldi understood this better than almost anyone. The Babylon 5 security chief had spent years uncovering conspiracies, exposing infiltrators, and navigating the murky politics of interstellar diplomacy. The Clone Wars reminded him uncomfortably of old conflicts from his own galaxy. The official explanations rarely matched reality. The public narratives often concealed deeper agendas. Every faction claimed righteousness while quietly pursuing power. Yet the more Garibaldi studied the Republic and the Separatists, the more he became convinced that something about the war simply did not make sense. The evidence appeared insignificant at first. Individual reports, financial records, military deployments that seemed strategically irrational, political decisions that benefited both sides simultaneously, entire campaigns that generated enormous casualties while accomplishing virtually nothing. Viewed separately, none of it proved anything. Viewed together, a disturbing pattern emerged. Late one evening, while Babylon 5's main observation dome glowed beneath distant stars, Garibaldi sat alone within security operations reviewing thousands of recovered intelligence files. Holographic displays floated around him while station computers cross-referenced information gathered from Republic, Separatist, and independent sources. Outside the panoramic windows, transports drifted through docking corridors illuminated by blue guidance beacons. Merchant vessels arrived from systems scattered across the galaxy. Republic cruisers held position at designated distances while Separatist escorts remained under constant monitoring. The station looked peaceful from the outside. Inside its data networks, however, Garibaldi was beginning to uncover something far darker. Several military offensives launched by the Republic should have ended the war years earlier. They had failed due to inexplicable intelligence leaks. Likewise, multiple Separatist operations that could have crippled Republic infrastructure had collapsed under strangely convenient circumstances. Someone appeared to be ensuring that neither side ever achieved decisive victory. Garibaldi frowned as another set of records aligned perfectly with the developing pattern. The Clone Wars were not being won. They were being managed. Across the station, other intelligence agencies had begun reaching similar conclusions. The Chiss ascendancy had quietly assigned analysts to investigate unusual political developments. Chiss strategists viewed warfare as a science. Their calculations repeatedly produced outcomes that differed dramatically from reality. Variables existed that should not exist. Patterns emerged that suggested manipulation on a galactic scale. Meanwhile, representatives of various criminal syndicates had noticed something equally suspicious. War created profit. Yet many organizations operating within the underworld had discovered that certain routes, markets, and supply chains somehow remained profitable regardless of which side controlled them. Someone appeared to benefit from every possible outcome. Even the Jedi Order had begun sensing inconsistencies. Masters visiting Babylon 5 frequently engaged in discussions with Minbari philosophers, whose understanding of destiny differed profoundly from traditional Jedi teachings. The Minbari believed that history possessed patterns beyond simple cause and effect. They believed that civilizations often became trapped within cycles orchestrated by unseen forces. Those conversations disturbed several Jedi more than they cared to admit, because increasingly, the Clone Wars felt exactly like such a cycle. The Force itself seemed clouded. Not chaotic. Not random. Clouded. As though someone intentionally obscured the truth. While investigators slowly assembled pieces of the puzzle, Babylon 5's status as a neutral zone transformed it into the galaxy's most valuable intelligence crossroads. Information flowed through its corridors like a river. Military officers exchanged rumors in observation lounges. Diplomats conducted secret meetings behind secured doors. Corporate executives negotiated contracts worth billions of credits. Independent traders carried stories from distant sectors. Every conversation contained fragments of truth. Every visitor brought new clues. The station became a living network connecting thousands of worlds. With every passing week, that network revealed increasingly alarming possibilities. Captain Sheridan noticed the change almost immediately. Babylon 5 felt different now. The atmosphere had shifted. Beneath the diplomatic receptions and cultural exchanges lurked growing tension. People whispered more frequently. Meetings ended abruptly when strangers approached. Encrypted transmissions multiplied. Security reports doubled. Something was happening. No one knew exactly what. But everyone could feel it. The turning point arrived when a Republic intelligence officer disappeared. Officially, the officer had departed the station voluntarily. Unofficially, surveillance footage showed something very different. The officer had been investigating unusual financial transactions linked to both Republic and Separatist military procurement contracts. Hours before his disappearance, he had transmitted an encrypted report to Coruscant. The report never arrived. Neither did the officer. Garibaldi personally reviewed every recording available. What he found raised even more questions. The final images showed unidentified individuals intercepting the officer near a maintenance corridor rarely used by civilians. Their movements were professional, efficient, military. Yet they belonged to neither Republic nor Separatist forces. Someone else was operating aboard Babylon 5. Someone with resources, training, and a willingness to eliminate threats. The investigation intensified. As security personnel dug deeper, additional anomalies surfaced. Encrypted communications routed through dozens of systems. False identities linked to legitimate governments. Financial transfers disguised beneath layers of bureaucracy. The scale suggested an organization far larger than ordinary espionage networks. Garibaldi had uncovered conspiracies before. This felt different. This felt systemic. As though the entire war rested atop foundations deliberately hidden from public view. Elsewhere aboard the station, Count Dooku watched developments unfold with growing fascination. The former Jedi Master possessed advantages few others could match. Unlike most political leaders, Dooku already understood that the galaxy was being manipulated. He simply did not know the full extent of the manipulation. Because while he served Darth Sidious, even he lacked complete knowledge of his master's plans. Now Babylon 5 threatened to expose secrets that had remained buried for years. Dooku recognized both danger and opportunity. If investigators uncovered evidence connecting Palpatine to the Clone Wars, the Sith Grand Plan could collapse. Yet if Dooku obtained that evidence first, he might gain leverage powerful enough to reshape the future. For perhaps the first time since embracing the dark side, Count Dooku began contemplating possibilities beyond Sidious. The thought itself was dangerous. The implications were revolutionary. Meanwhile, within the highest levels of Republic government, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine monitored Babylon 5 with increasing concern. The station had become far more influential than anticipated. Its neutrality attracted independent thinkers. Its distance from Coruscant insulated it from political pressure. Its information networks connected worlds beyond traditional channels of control. Worst of all, its leadership encouraged questions. Questions led to investigations. Investigations led toward truths that must remain hidden. Palpatine's carefully constructed future depended upon secrecy. The Clone Wars needed to continue. The Jedi needed to remain distracted. The Senate needed to remain dependent. Anything threatening those conditions represented a potential obstacle. Babylon 5 was becoming an obstacle. Not because it possessed military power. Not because it supported the Republic or the Separatists, but because it encouraged transparency. And transparency was dangerous. Far more dangerous than fleets. Far more dangerous than armies. Because ideas spread faster than starships. The station's influence continued expanding. Journalists arrived seeking stories. Academics organized conferences. Independent researchers exchanged findings. Historians analyzed patterns within the war. Each new perspective contributed another piece to a puzzle nobody fully understood. Yet slowly, inexorably, a larger picture emerged. The Clone Wars no longer appeared as a simple conflict between competing governments. They appeared engineered, designed, cultivated, by whom remained uncertain. But the conclusion became increasingly difficult to ignore. Someone wanted the war. Someone needed it. As these suspicions spread, Babylon 5 found itself balancing on the edge of a knife. Its neutrality remained intact, but pressure mounted from every direction. Republic officials demanded greater security oversight. Separatist representatives accused rivals of espionage. Criminal syndicates attempted to exploit growing instability. Foreign intelligence agencies expanded operations. The station became a battlefield where information replaced blasters. Secrets replaced starships. Truth itself became the most valuable weapon. Garibaldi understood the danger better than anyone. Late one night, standing alone within the observation dome, he stared across the endless stars surrounding Babylon 5. Thousands of distant suns illuminated the darkness. Some belonged to the Republic. Others belonged to the Separatists. Many belonged to neither. All were connected by invisible currents of politics, commerce, and history. Somewhere within that vast web lurked a hidden architect. Someone who benefited from every battle. Someone who remained invisible despite influencing billions of lives. Garibaldi did not know the name Darth Sidious. He did not know about Sith Lords, secret apprentices, or ancient prophecies. But his instincts told him one thing with absolute certainty. The Clone Wars were not what they seemed. And if Babylon 5 continued uncovering the truth, powerful forces would do everything necessary to stop them. Across the station, lights continued glowing within embassy towers and diplomatic chambers. Conversations continued. Investigations continued. Secrets continued accumulating. Unseen by most, the first cracks had begun appearing in the foundation of the greatest conspiracy in galactic history. The question was no longer whether someone was manipulating the war. The question was whether Babylon 5 would survive long enough to reveal the answer. Babylon 5 had been created to serve as neutral ground, a place where rivals could speak before reaching for weapons and where diplomacy might succeed where war had failed. Yet neutrality in the Star Wars galaxy proved far more complicated than neutrality had ever been in its own universe. The Clone Wars divided nearly every star system, every corporation, and every government. Even worlds that claimed independence found themselves drawn into the conflict through trade agreements, military contracts, political pressure, or simple necessity. As Babylon 5's reputation spread across the galaxy, it became something far more valuable than a diplomatic station. It became the only location where enemies could gather beneath the same roof without immediately violating their own political loyalties. Such a place inevitably attracted more than senators and ambassadors. It attracted those who thrived in the spaces between law and chaos. The first major influx came from smugglers. At first, station administrators viewed them as a minor inconvenience. Independent traders had always followed opportunity, and Babylon 5 represented perhaps the greatest commercial opportunity in the galaxy. Merchants from Republic worlds sought access to Separatist markets. Separatist businessmen wanted contacts within Republic territories. Neutral systems desired trade routes untouched by military blockades. Smugglers became the unofficial bridge connecting all three. Soon, docking bays that had once hosted diplomatic vessels became crowded with freighters of every imaginable design. Corellian transports rested beside Trade Federation cargo ships. Independent haulers from distant sectors unloaded valuable goods unavailable anywhere else. The bustling commercial districts expanded almost weekly as traders established permanent operations aboard the station. With commerce came profit. With profit came criminals. Michael Garibaldi recognized the warning signs immediately. His years as Babylon 5's security chief had taught him that organized crime rarely announced its arrival. It infiltrated gradually, disguising itself as legitimate business until it had embedded itself deeply enough to become difficult to remove. The Star Wars galaxy possessed criminal organizations on a scale far exceeding anything Babylon 5 had previously encountered. The Hutts arrived first. Representatives of powerful Hutt Khajiitics established offices within the station's commercial sectors under the guise of trade delegations. Officially, they sought access to new markets created by Babylon 5's neutrality. Unofficially, they recognized a golden opportunity. A station visited by Republic officials, Separatist leaders, independent merchants, and foreign civilizations represented an intelligence treasure trove. The Hutts understood information better than most governments. Information created leverage. Leverage created profit. Soon Hutt agents occupied numerous businesses throughout the station. Casinos appeared. Shipping companies emerged seemingly overnight. Financial institutions offered services to travelers reluctant to use Republic or Separatist banking networks. Everything looked legal on the surface. Garibaldi knew better. The Hutts never invested without expecting returns. The arrival of bounty hunters followed shortly afterward. The Clone Wars had created unprecedented demand for skilled trackers, mercenaries, and assassins. Contracts flowed endlessly between competing factions. Criminal organizations required specialists capable of operating beyond traditional military structures. Even legitimate governments occasionally relied upon bounty hunters when official channels proved inadequate. Babylon 5 quickly became a favored destination. Some hunters arrived seeking work. Others arrived pursuing targets. A few simply sought refuge between assignments. The station's corridors soon hosted some of the most dangerous individuals in the galaxy. Mandalorian armor became an increasingly common sight. Veteran mercenaries from dozens of worlds occupied observation lounges and cantinas. Stories spread of famous hunters accepting contracts worth millions of credits while seated only meters away from Republic senators and Separatist diplomats. The situation remained manageable. Then the Mandalorians themselves arrived. Their appearance altered everything. Unlike smugglers or bounty hunters, the Mandalorians represented far more than a profession. They were a culture, a people, a civilization shaped by centuries of warfare and tradition. The Clone Wars had fractured Mandalorian society. Some clans supported Duchess Satine's pacifist government. Others followed more traditional warrior ideals. Still others sold their services to whichever side offered sufficient compensation. Babylon 5 attracted all of them. For the first time in years, rival Mandalorian factions found themselves occupying the same neutral territory. Station leadership immediately recognized the danger. Mandalorians respected strength. They respected honor. They did not always respect restraint. The first confrontations occurred within days. Arguments erupted inside commercial districts. Old grudges resurfaced. Competing interpretations of Mandalorian identity collided beneath Babylon 5's metal ceilings. Security teams intervened repeatedly to prevent violence. Each incident ended peacefully. Barely. Yet despite these tensions, something remarkable began occurring. The station's neutral environment forced conversations that normally would never happen. Warriors who expected battle found debate instead. Rivals who anticipated bloodshed encountered negotiation. The process was uncomfortable, sometimes infuriating, but gradually, relationships formed. Not friendships, not alliances. Understanding. That understanding proved valuable as Babylon 5 continued growing. Meanwhile, Garibaldi faced increasingly difficult challenges maintaining security. Every major criminal syndicate wanted influence aboard the station. The Hutts competed with Black Sun operatives. Pike agents expanded narcotics distribution networks. Independent crime organizations established footholds wherever opportunities appeared. None wished to dominate Babylon 5 entirely. That would provoke unwanted attention. Instead, each sought limited influence. Limited influence created a complex balance. One wrong move could shatter it. The station became a chessboard occupied by dozens of competing players. Garibaldi spent most days preventing those players from turning the station into a battlefield. His task became significantly harder when intelligence reports indicated that several syndicates were using Babylon 5 as a meeting ground for negotiations. Normally, criminal organizations avoided direct contact. The risks were too great. Babylon 5 changed the equation. Neutral territory offered protection. Representatives could discuss territory, trade routes, and business arrangements without fear of immediate retaliation. The station inadvertently became a diplomatic center for criminals. Sheridan hated the situation. Yet alternatives were limited. Expelling every criminal organization would destroy Babylon 5's neutrality. Allowing unrestricted operations would compromise station security. A balance had to be maintained. The balancing act grew even more complicated when Republic intelligence and Separatist spies began exploiting criminal networks for information gathering. Suddenly smugglers carried more than cargo. Bounty hunters accepted contracts involving surveillance. Syndicates sold intelligence to multiple buyers simultaneously. The station's information ecosystem expanded into something nearly impossible to control. Every conversation might conceal espionage. Every transaction might support larger political agendas. Every visitor might represent hidden interests. Babylon 5 became a crossroads where legality and criminality blended together. Yet amid this growing complexity, unexpected opportunities emerged. Mandalorian clans discovered common interests despite political differences. Independent traders formed commercial partnerships spanning Republic and Separatist territories. Even certain criminal organizations found cooperation more profitable than conflict. The station demonstrated something increasingly rare within the galaxy. People could coexist despite profound disagreements. Not perfectly, not peacefully, but productively. That lesson attracted attention. Some Jedi visitors viewed Babylon 5 as proof that diplomacy still possessed value despite the Clone Wars. Others worried that neutrality merely concealed corruption. Both perspectives contained truth. The station had become neither utopia nor failure. It had become reality. Messy, complicated, dangerous, necessary. One evening, as artificial sunlight dimmed across the station's central sectors, Garibaldi stood overlooking one of Babylon 5's busiest marketplaces. Thousands of beings moved through brightly illuminated corridors. Republic officers examined merchandise beside Separatist businessmen. Chiss merchants negotiated contracts with Corellian traders. Mandalorian warriors walked past bounty hunters without reaching for weapons. Nearby, a Hutt representative concluded a business deal while under discreet surveillance from multiple intelligence agencies. The scene appeared chaotic, yet somehow it worked. At least for now. Garibaldi knew the arrangement remained fragile. Too many interests converged here. Too many secrets circulated through the station. Too many powerful organizations viewed Babylon 5 as essential. Any major incident could ignite violence. Any political crisis could destroy neutrality. Any successful provocation could transform the station into another battlefield. The danger became even clearer when reports arrived regarding increased activity among extremist factions. Not everyone appreciated Babylon 5's existence. Certain Republic hardliners viewed neutrality as betrayal. Some Separatist leaders considered the station an obstacle. Several criminal organizations resented restrictions imposed by station security. Radical Mandalorian groups rejected coexistence entirely. Each possessed reasons to destabilize the station. Each possessed resources capable of causing serious damage. Sheridan and Delenn understood the threat. The station's greatest achievement had become its greatest vulnerability. Babylon 5 succeeded because everyone needed it. That same importance ensured everyone wanted influence over it. Maintaining independence required constant vigilance. As months passed, the station evolved into something unique within the Star Wars galaxy. Not a Republic world. Not a Separatist stronghold. Not a criminal haven. Not a military fortress. It existed between those categories. A neutral island surrounded by a sea of conflict. The Hutts saw opportunity. The Mandalorians saw possibility. Smugglers saw profit. Bounty hunters saw contracts. Politicians saw leverage. Spies saw information. Everyone wanted something from Babylon 5. Few understood the price required to preserve it. Late one night, while stars drifted silently beyond the station's massive observation windows, Sheridan reviewed security updates detailing dozens of disputes resolved without bloodshed. The list seemed insignificant compared to galactic wars. A prevented fight here. A negotiated compromise there. A criminal operation disrupted before violence occurred. Small victories. Yet those victories mattered. Because elsewhere, across thousands of worlds, disagreements ended with armies. Here, at least occasionally, they ended with conversation. That fragile success continued attracting more visitors. More factions. More opportunities. And more dangers. Babylon 5 had become a mirror reflecting the galaxy itself. A place where heroes, villains, warriors, criminals, diplomats, and dreamers occupied the same space. A place where peace existed not because conflict had disappeared, but because conflict was being managed. The challenge grew harder every day. Soon, forces far more dangerous than smugglers, Hutts, or Mandalorian rivalries would begin testing the limits of that fragile neutrality. And when they did, Babylon 5 would discover whether its experiment in coexistence could survive the darkest secrets hidden within the Clone Wars. The success of Babylon 5 had become a problem. What began as an unexpected anomaly emerging from a dimensional rupture had transformed into one of the most influential locations in the galaxy. Republic senators traveled there to negotiate agreements impossible to achieve on Coruscant. Separatist diplomats used its neutral halls to establish contacts beyond the reach of Republic surveillance. Independent systems viewed the station as proof that neutrality could survive amid the chaos of the Clone Wars. Merchants crossed dangerous hyperspace routes simply to gain access to its expanding markets. Criminal syndicates respected its authority just enough to avoid open warfare within its sectors. Even the Jedi Order increasingly relied upon Babylon 5 as a place where discussions could occur beyond the increasingly toxic political atmosphere surrounding the Republic. Every month the station's influence grew. Every month its importance increased. Every month it became more dangerous to one man than an entire fleet of enemy warships. That man sat at the center of the Republic itself. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine smiled for the cameras, addressed the Senate, and continued presenting himself as the weary leader guiding civilization through its darkest hour. Publicly, he welcomed Babylon 5's efforts to promote peace. He praised diplomatic initiatives and emphasized the importance of maintaining communication between competing powers. Privately, Darth Sidious viewed the station as a direct threat to everything he had spent decades building. The Sith Lord had engineered the Clone Wars with extraordinary precision. Every battle, every political crisis, every military escalation served a larger purpose. The war was never meant to end through victory. It existed to transform the Republic into something entirely different. Fear would create dependence. Dependence would create authority. Authority would create empire. The Jedi would be destroyed. The Senate would surrender its freedoms. The galaxy would embrace dictatorship willingly. That future depended upon division. Babylon 5 represented the opposite. It encouraged cooperation. It encouraged transparency. It encouraged independent thought. Most dangerous of all, it encouraged people to ask questions. Questions were the enemy of manipulation. The station's intelligence networks had already begun uncovering inconsistencies surrounding the Clone Wars. Garibaldi's investigations were moving steadily closer to truths that could not be allowed to emerge. Chiss analysts had identified patterns suggesting deliberate interference in military operations. Certain Jedi had begun discussing philosophical ideas that challenged assumptions underpinning the war itself. Even Count Dooku's growing fascination with Babylon 5 created unpredictable variables within Sidious's carefully controlled plans. The station was becoming more than a diplomatic center. It was becoming a catalyst. And catalysts had a habit of creating outcomes nobody could predict. For the first time in years, Darth Sidious found himself confronting a threat he could not simply destroy through military force. A direct attack against Babylon 5 would be disastrous. The Republic publicly supported the station. The Separatists valued its neutrality. The Chiss ascendancy viewed it as strategically important. Countless independent systems admired its example. Destroying it openly would unite factions that normally distrusted one another. The station needed to fall. But it needed to fall from within. Sidious had spent a lifetime manipulating institutions. He understood that credibility mattered more than armor. Trust mattered more than weapons. If Babylon 5 lost its reputation for neutrality, its influence would collapse naturally. The station did not need to be destroyed. It needed to be discredited. The first stage of the operation began quietly. Agents loyal to Sidious infiltrated information networks throughout the galaxy. Rumors spread through political circles, trade organizations, and intelligence communities. The stories varied depending upon the audience. Some claimed Babylon 5 secretly favored the Republic. Others insisted it had become a haven for Separatist sympathizers. Certain reports suggested criminal syndicates controlled key station officials. Others alleged foreign powers manipulated its leadership. None of the accusations required proof. They merely required repetition. Across countless worlds, suspicion began growing. The campaign expanded rapidly. Forged intelligence reports appeared within Republic databases. Fabricated financial records suggested corruption among Babylon 5 administrators. Anonymous sources claimed that classified military information regularly passed through station channels. The allegations contradicted one another. That did not matter. The objective was not consistency. The objective was uncertainty. If enough people doubted Babylon 5's neutrality, the station's greatest strength would become its greatest weakness. Meanwhile, darker operations unfolded behind the scenes. Several intelligence officers investigating sensitive matters disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Smuggling organizations previously cooperating with station authorities suddenly became hostile. Diplomatic negotiations collapsed due to information leaks that should have remained secure. Every incident appeared isolated. Every crisis possessed a plausible explanation. Yet together they formed a pattern. Someone was systematically undermining Babylon 5. Garibaldi recognized the pattern almost immediately. The security chief had encountered coordinated destabilization campaigns before. He knew what organized sabotage looked like. The attacks rarely targeted physical infrastructure. Instead, they targeted trust. Trust between governments. Trust between allies. Trust between institutions. Trust between individuals. Destroy trust, and everything else eventually collapsed. Unfortunately, identifying the architect proved nearly impossible. Every trail ended abruptly. Every suspect led nowhere. Every piece of evidence appeared deliberately planted. Whoever orchestrated the campaign possessed extraordinary resources. More troubling, they understood politics as well as espionage. Garibaldi found himself fighting an invisible enemy, one capable of turning every success into a potential scandal. The pressure intensified when several Republic senators publicly questioned Babylon 5's neutrality during a highly publicized Senate session. News networks across the galaxy broadcast the accusations immediately. Political commentators debated the station's legitimacy. Opponents seized opportunities to advance personal agendas. Supporters struggled to respond. The controversy spread rapidly. For the first time since its arrival, Babylon 5 faced a genuine crisis of confidence. Sheridan watched events unfold with growing frustration. Every accusation seemed absurd when examined closely. Yet the sheer volume of misinformation created confusion. People rarely investigated details. They reacted to headlines. The station's reputation had taken years to build. It could be damaged in weeks. As political tensions mounted, Sidious escalated his efforts. Several extremist groups received anonymous funding. Organizations already opposed to Babylon 5 suddenly possessed greater resources. Demonstrations erupted on multiple worlds. Propaganda campaigns intensified. Influential figures began questioning whether the station represented a threat to galactic stability. Each development appeared organic. None traced back to Coruscant. That was precisely how Sidious preferred it. The greatest manipulations were those nobody recognized as manipulation. Even the Jedi began feeling the effects. Masters visiting Babylon 5 encountered increasing hostility from political leaders suspicious of the station's intentions. Certain council members worried that growing controversy might compromise diplomatic efforts. Others feared the station's enemies sought something more significant than mere political damage. Yoda sensed a deeper disturbance. The force around Babylon 5 felt different. Not corrupted. Disturbed. As though unseen currents pushed events toward confrontation. Yet the source remained hidden behind the same dark veil clouding the entire Clone Wars. The ancient Jedi understood one truth clearly. Someone feared what Babylon 5 represented. Fear always revealed weakness. Meanwhile, Count Dooku observed developments with increasing concern. Unlike most political figures, Dooku recognized manipulation when he saw it. The campaign against Babylon 5 resembled operations he himself had conducted throughout the war. The methods were sophisticated. The execution was precise. The objectives aligned perfectly with preserving conflict. The more Dooku studied the situation, the more uncomfortable he became. Because the tactics felt familiar. Too familiar. They reflected lessons taught by a master strategist. A Sith strategist. For perhaps the first time, Count Dooku seriously considered the possibility that Babylon 5 threatened not merely the Republic or the Separatists. It threatened Darth Sidious himself. That realization changed everything. Elsewhere aboard the station, Delenn emerged as one of Babylon 5's strongest defenders. The Minbari ambassador understood the nature of ideological warfare better than most. Her people had survived centuries of conflict fueled by fear and misunderstanding. She recognized that the attacks against Babylon 5 were designed to provoke division. The station's enemies wanted people to stop trusting one another. The solution, therefore, required strengthening trust rather than retreating from controversy. Delenn organized diplomatic forums, cultural exchanges, and public discussions involving representatives from every major faction. Transparency became the station's shield. The strategy worked. Partially. Many visitors appreciated the effort. Others viewed it as evidence of hidden motives. The battle for credibility continued. As weeks turned into months, Babylon 5 endured a relentless campaign unlike anything it had previously faced. No fleets appeared. No armies invaded. No star systems burned. Instead, rumors spread. Alliances weakened. Suspicions multiplied. The station survived physically while suffering political wounds. Exactly as Sidious intended. Yet despite these setbacks, something unexpected happened. The attacks exposed how many people valued Babylon 5. Independent systems publicly defended the station. Merchants highlighted its economic importance. Diplomats emphasized its role in preventing escalation. Even rival factions occasionally united to oppose efforts threatening neutrality. Every attack generated resistance. Every attempt to divide people reminded them why the station mattered. The campaign achieved success. But not enough. Babylon 5 weakened. It did not break. Standing within his private chambers on Coruscant, Darth Sidious reviewed intelligence updates regarding the operation. The station remained functional. Its influence had diminished. Its reputation had suffered. Yet it endured. For now. The Sith Lord stared through towering windows overlooking the endless cityscape of Coruscant. Thousands of lights stretched across the horizon like stars trapped upon a planet's surface. His plans remained intact. The Republic still moved toward transformation. The Jedi remained blind. The war continued. Yet Babylon 5 persisted as an unpredictable variable. A place where enemies spoke instead of fighting. A place where investigators asked dangerous questions. A place where truth occasionally surfaced despite extraordinary efforts to suppress it. Sidious understood that the struggle was far from over. The station had survived his first strike. The next would be far more dangerous. Because while Babylon 5 fought to preserve its credibility, deeper secrets hidden within the Clone Wars were moving steadily toward exposure. And if those secrets emerged into the light, the future empire itself could begin unraveling before it was ever born. Babylon 5 had already changed the course of the Clone Wars long before the Peace Summit officially began. What started as an impossible station appearing from beyond known reality had become something neither the Republic nor the Confederacy of Independent Systems could ignore. The station stood suspended against the darkness of space like a monument to possibilities the galaxy had forgotten. For nearly 3 years, every negotiation had failed before it began. Every ceasefire had collapsed beneath suspicion. Every diplomatic initiative had drowned beneath bloodshed and political manipulation. Yet Babylon 5 remained different. It belonged to neither side. It commanded no army. It claimed no territory. It sought no conquest. Its greatest weapon was the simple belief that enemies could still speak to one another. That belief was precisely why Darth Sidious feared it. Across the gleaming towers of Coruscant, the Supreme Chancellor publicly supported the summit while privately orchestrating dozens of contingencies designed to ensure its failure. The Clone Wars were not supposed to end through diplomacy. They were not supposed to end through mutual understanding. They were not supposed to end at all until every piece of Sidious's grand design had fallen perfectly into place. The Republic needed to be exhausted. The Jedi needed to be isolated. The galaxy needed to become desperate enough to accept authoritarian control. Peace threatened everything. Yet for the first time since the war began, powerful voices on both sides wanted an alternative. The journey toward Babylon 5 became one of the most heavily guarded diplomatic operations in galactic history. Republic cruisers escorted senators through hyperspace corridors carefully monitored by clone fleets. Separatist warships carried corporate leaders and political representatives under equally intense protection. Even neutral worlds dispatched observers, hoping to witness an event many believed impossible. The station itself transformed in preparation. Docking bays that normally handled merchants and civilian travelers now received diplomatic vessels from every corner of known space. Security forces worked continuously to coordinate arrivals while maintaining Babylon 5's strict neutrality. Customs officials processed thousands of visitors. Additional patrols moved through the station's vast corridors. Observation decks overlooking the stars filled with reporters, analysts, and political observers eager to document history. The atmosphere felt unlike anything the galaxy had experienced since before the war. For years, citizens had grown accustomed to hearing casualty reports, fleet movements, and battle updates. Entire generations of young beings had known nothing except conflict. Now, suddenly, conversations focused upon possibilities rather than victories. Hope began appearing where cynicism had once dominated. Not everyone welcomed that change. Michael Garibaldi spent the days before the summit chasing threats emerging faster than his security teams could eliminate them. Criminal syndicates viewed the gathering as an opportunity. Intelligence agencies flooded the station with operatives. Assassins arrived disguised as diplomats. Separatist extremists viewed negotiation as betrayal. Republic hardliners believed victory remained possible through military means. Meanwhile, hidden among all of them, Sidious's agents worked tirelessly. Some spread misinformation. Others manufactured incidents designed to increase distrust. Several attempted direct sabotage. Every day produced new discoveries. Every discovery revealed how many forces feared peace. Garibaldi's instincts, sharpened through years of political intrigue and security work, told him the station had become the center of a storm larger than anyone fully understood. He could sense invisible hands moving events from the shadows. The evidence collected over previous months continued pointing toward a terrifying conclusion. Someone was manipulating both sides of the war. Someone powerful. Someone patient. Someone extraordinarily dangerous. Unfortunately, proving it remained almost impossible. As delegates continued arriving, the Jedi Order dispatched one of its most respected diplomatic teams. Obi-Wan Kenobi represented the Republic alongside several senior senators. Anakin Skywalker accompanied the mission as both protector and observer, while other Jedi Masters participated through secure communications. The Council hoped the summit might reveal pathways toward ending the war that battlefield victories never could. For Obi-Wan, Babylon 5 represented a fascinating contradiction. The station's diverse population demonstrated cooperation between species that normally possessed little in common. Ancient rivalries existed here, yet daily life continued. Conflicting ideologies shared space without immediately resorting to violence. Problems remained, certainly, but the station itself served as proof that coexistence was possible. It was exactly the kind of environment the Jedi once encouraged throughout the galaxy. Anakin viewed it differently. Walking through Babylon 5's crowded corridors, he saw endless examples of beings solving problems without Jedi intervention. Merchants negotiated disputes. Security officers maintained order. Diplomats pursued compromises. Citizens adapted and survived despite extraordinary challenges. The station made him question assumptions he rarely examined. The Republic claimed to protect peace. The Jedi claimed to preserve balance. Yet this station, isolated and independent, had arguably achieved more meaningful diplomacy in months than the Republic had managed in years. Those thoughts lingered uncomfortably. Elsewhere aboard Babylon 5, Count Dooku arrived under carefully negotiated conditions that shocked much of the galaxy. The leader of the Separatist movement walked openly through the station accompanied by security personnel from multiple factions. Cameras recorded every movement. Observers watched every interaction. Many expected violence. None came. Dooku understood the significance of appearances. His elegant demeanor, measured speech, and aristocratic confidence projected legitimacy. He wanted the galaxy to see a statesman rather than a warlord. Babylon 5 provided the perfect stage. Here, removed from battlefields and propaganda, individuals could evaluate arguments directly. What made the situation truly remarkable was that both Dooku and the Jedi occupied the same station simultaneously without immediate conflict. The symbolism alone sent shockwaves across countless star systems. News networks broadcast continuous coverage. Citizens gathered around holoprojectors. Families discussed possibilities they had nearly abandoned. Could the war actually end? Could peace be real? Could enemies who had spent years destroying one another find common ground? The answers remained uncertain. Then the summit officially began. The primary council chamber of Babylon 5 had hosted many important gatherings throughout its history, but nothing approached this scale. Delegates representing thousands of worlds filled the vast circular hall. Republic senators occupied one section. Separatist representatives occupied another. Neutral observers, Chiss diplomats, Mandalorian envoys, commercial leaders, and independent systems completed the assembly. The chamber itself seemed designed for such a moment. Towering architecture rose toward distant ceilings illuminated by soft golden light. Massive transparent panels revealed stars beyond. The atmosphere balanced grandeur with functionality, creating a space where participants felt significant without becoming overwhelmed. President Sheridan opened proceedings with characteristic clarity. He did not promise miracles. He did not claim easy solutions. He simply reminded everyone why they had come. Entire sectors burned while leaders argued. Millions died while politicians maneuvered. Civilizations suffered while powerful individuals pursued victory. The purpose of the summit was not assigning blame. The purpose was determining whether the future required endless war. The first hours proceeded cautiously. Republic representatives outlined concerns regarding separatist aggression. Separatist delegates countered with grievances regarding corruption within the Republic. Arguments emerged. Accusations followed. Old wounds reopened. Many observers feared the summit might collapse almost immediately. Yet something unexpected happened. Unlike previous negotiations conducted under military pressure, participants could not simply leave and resume fighting. Babylon 5's neutral environment forced engagement. Delegates found themselves sharing corridors, dining areas, observation decks, and meeting spaces. Personal interactions developed outside formal sessions. Human beings who expected monsters discovered ordinary people. Enemies acquired faces. Statistics became individuals. The process remained imperfect, but it worked. Slowly, painfully, genuinely. Obi-Wan spent hours speaking with separatist delegates who sincerely believed independence represented the only solution to systemic corruption. Some arguments challenged assumptions he had carried for years. While he disagreed with many conclusions, he recognized legitimacy within certain concerns. Across the station, Dooku experienced similar moments. Several Republic senators demonstrated integrity impossible to dismiss. Some genuinely desired reform. Others possessed courage he respected despite opposing political positions. Neither side abandoned core beliefs. Yet understanding began replacing caricature. That alone represented progress. Meanwhile, Anakin's attention drifted elsewhere. The Force felt strange aboard Babylon 5 during the summit. Not weaker. Different. Thousands of individuals carried hopes, fears, and possibilities into the station. The resulting currents within the Force created patterns unlike anything he had previously experienced. Instead of battlefield tension or political hostility, he sensed crossroads. Choices. Potential futures. Paths diverging endlessly. For brief moments, he imagined a galaxy where the war ended. The vision felt almost impossible. Almost. Unfortunately, peace created panic among those who benefited from conflict. Deep within hidden communication networks, Sidious monitored developments with growing concern. His agents reported increasing cooperation. Public support for negotiations expanded daily. Influential figures previously committed to victory now discussed compromise. The summit was succeeding. Not completely. Not yet. But enough to become dangerous. The Dark Lord understood something most participants did not. The Clone Wars existed because he willed them into existence. Every major development served purposes extending far beyond public understanding. If the summit achieved meaningful progress, years of planning could unravel. That could not be permitted. New orders moved outward immediately. Covert operatives activated contingency protocols. Financial networks initiated destabilization campaigns. Assassination teams received revised objectives. Most ominously of all, evidence fabricated over months suddenly appeared throughout intelligence channels. Evidence designed to destroy trust. Garibaldi discovered the first signs only hours later. Reports emerged suggesting certain Republic delegates planned arrests targeting Separatist representatives. Simultaneously, Separatist intelligence received information claiming Republic forces prepared military operations disguised as diplomatic security measures. The documents appeared authentic. The timing was devastating. Suspicions spread rapidly. Delegates who had spent days building fragile trust suddenly questioned everything. Arguments intensified. Accusations returned. Progress threatened to collapse. Garibaldi's investigation teams worked frantically. Something about the documents felt wrong. Too convenient. Too perfectly destructive. As analysts examined metadata and communication patterns, alarming connections began emerging. The forgeries demonstrated extraordinary sophistication. Whoever created them possessed access exceeding normal intelligence capabilities. The deeper investigators looked, the stranger everything became. Patterns linked back toward sources neither Republic nor Separatist agencies could explain. Invisible fingerprints connected multiple crises spanning years. For the first time, Garibaldi began suspecting that the manipulator behind the Clone Wars might actually exist. Not as a theory. Not as speculation. As a real individual. A terrifying realization followed. If such a person existed, the summit represented the greatest threat they had ever faced. And they would not stop with forged documents. As another tense session concluded beneath Babylon 5's golden lights, representatives dispersed into corridors filled with uncertainty. Hope remained alive, but danger surrounded it from every direction. Unknown enemies moved through shadows. Ancient plans approached critical moments. Powerful figures prepared desperate actions. Yet despite everything, the summit endured. Republic delegates still spoke with Separatists. Jedi still met former enemies. Citizens across the galaxy still watched and hoped. For the first time since the Clone Wars began, peace no longer felt impossible. And that made it more dangerous than any battle ever fought. The Peace Summit aboard Babylon 5 was supposed to mark the beginning of the end for the Clone Wars. For a brief moment, it seemed possible that history itself had shifted course. Republic senators who had spent years condemning the Separatists had sat across from their rivals and discovered individuals rather than enemies. Separatist leaders who had built entire political careers around opposing Coruscant had begun acknowledging that not every problem could be solved through independence or war. Even Jedi and former Jedi found themselves confronting uncomfortable truths about the conflict consuming the galaxy. The station had become more than neutral territory. It had become a symbol. Across thousands of star systems, citizens watched Babylon 5 and dared to imagine that peace might actually exist beyond speeches and propaganda. That possibility terrified Darth Sidious. For decades, every step of his rise had depended upon division. Fear was his foundation. Conflict was his currency. The Republic had to collapse under the weight of endless war. The Jedi had to become generals instead of guardians. The galaxy had to become desperate enough to embrace authoritarian rule willingly. Babylon 5 threatened all of it. If peace emerged before the final stages of his plan, then years of manipulation could unravel before he ever reached the throne he had spent a lifetime pursuing. The summit had become intolerable. It had to be destroyed. Not politically. Not through disinformation. Not through covert sabotage. Destroyed completely. Far from Babylon 5, secret orders spread through hidden channels controlled by the Dark Lord. Separatist commanders loyal not to Count Dooku but to Sidious received new instructions. Sleeper agents embedded throughout multiple organizations activated contingency protocols. Entire fleets changed course under encrypted directives disguised as emergency deployments. Military assets from both sides began converging toward the station without public explanation. The trap was being set. What Sidious intended was brutally simple. Babylon 5 would become the site of a catastrophic military disaster. The Republic would blame the Separatists. The Separatists would blame the Republic. The fragile trust built during the summit would shatter beneath fire and blood. Peace would die. The war would continue. And from its ashes, the Empire would eventually rise. Unfortunately for Sidious, events were no longer moving entirely according to his design. Michael Garibaldi had spent weeks following invisible trails connecting sabotage attempts, intelligence leaks, political manipulations, and assassination plots. Every investigation led toward the same conclusion. Someone possessed influence across both sides of the war. Someone was orchestrating events from behind countless layers of deception. The evidence remained incomplete. But it was enough. As security analysts examined newly intercepted communications, patterns emerged that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Fleet movements around Babylon 5 made no strategic sense. Republic formations were appearing where no Republic ships should be operating. Separatist task forces were abandoning critical fronts without explanation. Something enormous was approaching. Garibaldi immediately alerted Sheridan. Within hours, Babylon 5's command staff began preparing emergency defense protocols. The timing could not have been worse. Inside the station, negotiations had finally reached a critical turning point. After days of arguments and compromises, representatives from both sides had begun discussing actual frameworks for ending hostilities. Nothing was finalized. Nothing was guaranteed. Yet for the first time since Geonosis, genuine progress existed. Then the sensors detected incoming fleets. The command center fell silent. Dozens of officers stared at tactical displays illuminating across holographic projections. More contacts appeared every second. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Shock rippled throughout the room. Republic vessels. Separatist warships. Unknown ships. Entire battle groups were converging on Babylon 5 simultaneously. Sheridan immediately recognized what it meant. Someone wanted a war. And they wanted it here. Emergency broadcasts raced across the station. Diplomatic sessions ended instantly. Security teams deployed throughout civilian sectors. Docking operations halted. Visitors rushed toward shelters as alarms echoed through massive corridors. Outside, beneath the cold light of distant stars, the largest military confrontation in Babylon 5's history began taking shape. The first fleets to emerge from hyperspace belonged to the Republic. Venator-class star destroyers filled the darkness like steel mountains moving through space. Hundreds of escort vessels accompanied them. Clone fighter squadrons launched immediately, forming defensive screens around key approach vectors. Moments later, Separatist armadas arrived. Providence-class carriers. Munificent frigates. Lucrehulk command ships. Entire formations appeared from hyperspace in waves stretching across sensor range. The scale became staggering. Neither side understood why the other had arrived. Neither side trusted the situation. Weapons charged. Fighter wings maneuvered. One mistake would ignite catastrophe. On Babylon 5, Jedi representatives scrambled to prevent disaster. Obi-Wan Kenobi immediately recognized the danger. Neither fleet had entered the system expecting diplomacy. They had arrived believing some form of military crisis existed. Confusion alone could trigger battle. Fear would do the rest. Anakin sensed something worse. Through the Force, he felt manipulation. Not merely military tension. Design. Intent. A hidden hand moving events toward violence. The same feeling he had experienced countless times throughout the war. Yet before he could identify its source, the first shots were fired. No one ever learned who fired them. Some claimed Republic vessels opened fire first. Others blamed Separatist commanders. Still others suspected sabotage. The truth disappeared beneath the chaos that followed. Turbolasers erupted across space. Brilliant green and crimson energy slashed through darkness. Starfighters accelerated toward targets. Missiles streaked between formations. Within seconds, the system transformed into a battlefield. The summit collapsed. War had arrived. Babylon 5 suddenly found itself trapped between opposing armadas. Sheridan refused to abandon neutrality. The station's defenses activated immediately. Massive weapon platforms emerged from hidden compartments. Defense grids powered up. Babylon 5's fighter squadrons launched into the growing storm. Their mission was not victory. It was survival. The station opened communications across every channel available. Republic frequencies. Separatist frequencies. Civilian frequencies. Emergency frequencies. The message remained the same. Stop fighting. No one listened. As explosions illuminated the stars, thousands of pilots and commanders became consumed by battlefield instincts. Years of conflict had conditioned both sides to react with aggression. Every attack provoked retaliation. Every casualty intensified the cycle. The war that Babylon 5 had tried to end now threatened to destroy it. Then new players entered the battle. Mandalorian fleets arrived first. Several clans that had established connections with Babylon 5 refused to abandon the station. Beskar armored warriors launched from transports and warships, entering combat with characteristic ferocity. Their fighters struck vulnerable targets across both sides, targeting anyone threatening civilian sectors. Moments later, smugglers and independent captains joined the defense. Not because of ideology, because Babylon 5 mattered. The station had become a place where merchants prospered, refugees found safety, and neutral worlds conducted business free from political interference. Losing it would damage countless lives. Ships that normally avoided military engagements suddenly entered combat willingly. The battlefield expanded. Then came the Chiss, blue-skinned commanders who had once watched Babylon 5 emerge from a dimensional rupture now committed their forces openly. Chiss warships executed precise maneuvers through the chaos, reinforcing defensive lines around the station. The battle became something unprecedented. Not Republic versus Separatists. Not Jedi versus Sith. Everyone against destruction itself. Inside the station, Count Dooku reached the same conclusion as Obi-Wan Kenobi. Someone had orchestrated this. Years earlier, they would have blamed one another immediately. Now they hesitated. That hesitation changed everything. Dooku remembered evidence uncovered during the summit. Obi-Wan remembered inconsistencies stretching back through the entire war. Neither possessed complete answers, but both sensed the same truth. A hidden architect stood behind the conflict, and Babylon 5 had threatened to expose them. For perhaps the first time since abandoning the Jedi Order, Dooku found himself fighting for something other than victory. He fought to preserve possibility. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, Darth Sidious watched events unfold from Coruscant. At first, satisfaction filled him. The station burned. The summit had collapsed. War consumed everything. Then the situation changed. Instead of turning against one another completely, key figures began cooperating. Jedi coordinated civilian evacuations alongside Separatist personnel. Neutral fleets reinforced defensive positions. Babylon 5's commanders maintained order despite overwhelming pressure. Most alarming of all, individuals who should have been enemies increasingly acted like allies. The station had altered them. Not enough to end the war, but enough to resist manipulation. For the first time in decades, Sidious felt something dangerously close to uncertainty. The battle intensified. Venator destroyers exchanged devastating broadsides with Separatist cruisers. Fighter swarms collided in massive engagements stretching across thousands of kilometers. Explosions illuminated space like artificial stars. Babylon 5 remained at the center. Every side fought around it. Every side threatened it. Every side, in different ways, needed it. Sheridan coordinated defenses relentlessly. Garibaldi directed security operations throughout the station. Delenn worked alongside diplomats, trying desperately to preserve what remained of the summit. Then evidence finally emerged. The breakthrough arrived through intelligence gathered by multiple investigations converging simultaneously. Records recovered by Garibaldi aligned with information collected by Chiss analysts. Separatist communications matched anomalies discovered by Republic intelligence. A pattern appeared. One individual. One source. One mastermind. The impossible truth began surfacing. The Clone Wars had never truly belonged to the Republic or the Separatists. Someone had manipulated both. Someone powerful enough to move fleets, control intelligence networks, and manufacture crises on a galactic scale. As fragments of evidence spread among key leaders, shock followed. The implications were staggering. If true, then nearly everything about the war had been a lie. Outside, the battle still raged. Starships exploded. Fighters burned. Soldiers died. Yet beneath the chaos, something extraordinary was happening. The foundations of Sidious's grand design were beginning to crack. Babylon 5 had survived sabotage. It had survived political attacks. Now it was surviving open war. And with every passing hour, more beings realized that the true enemy might not be sitting across the negotiating table. The true enemy might be the one who had spent years ensuring they never sat there at all. As fire illuminated the stars around Babylon 5, The battle reached its most violent phase. Republic fleets, Separatist armadas, Mandalorian warriors, Chiss commanders, smugglers, diplomats, Jedi Knights, and even Count Dooku himself found their destinies converging around a single realization. The Clone Wars were built upon deception. And somewhere in the shadows, the architect of that deception was preparing one final move. The battle for Babylon 5 was no longer about saving a station. It was about saving the future of the galaxy itself. The battle for Babylon 5 raged for nearly 18 standard hours before the momentum of the conflict finally began to shift. What had started as a carefully engineered catastrophe designed to destroy the peace process had evolved into something Darth Sidious never anticipated. Instead of reigniting hatred between the Republic and the Separatists, the battle had exposed the existence of a deeper enemy lurking behind the Clone Wars themselves. Across burning starfighter wreckage, shattered capital ships, and overloaded communications channels, officers and leaders on both sides found themselves confronting the same terrifying possibility. They had been manipulated. For years, they had fought a war that increasingly resembled a performance orchestrated by an unseen hand. The realization spread unevenly but relentlessly. Republic admirals who had once viewed every Separatist vessel as a target now hesitated before opening fire. Separatist commanders who had spent years battling clone fleets began questioning why so many strategic decisions throughout the war seemed designed to maximize suffering rather than achieve victory. Intelligence officers from both factions compared data gathered during the summit and discovered disturbing similarities. Supply routes had been compromised in ways that benefited neither side. Political crises had emerged with suspicious timing. Assassinations, military disasters, and diplomatic failures all revealed patterns that no longer looked accidental. At the center of everything stood Babylon 5. The station remained damaged but operational. Fires burned across several sectors. Emergency crews worked without rest. Medical facilities overflowed with casualties from every faction imaginable. Republic personnel received treatment beside Separatist soldiers. Smugglers helped transport wounded civilians. Mandalorians guarded evacuation corridors alongside clone troopers. The station's neutrality had survived the battle, but it had transformed into something larger than neutrality. It had become proof. Proof that cooperation was possible. Proof that the war did not have to define the future. Proof that enemies could become allies when confronted by a greater truth. Sheridan understood that the opportunity would not last forever. The galaxy stood at a crossroads. If the momentum generated by the battle faded, then old fears and rivalries would inevitably return. Decades of history could not be erased overnight. Yet if decisive action occurred now, while the shock remained fresh, perhaps something extraordinary could happen. Perhaps history itself could change. As reconstruction efforts continued aboard Babylon 5, emergency meetings began among surviving leaders. Republic senators, Separatist representatives, Chiss diplomats, independent systems, and Babylon 5 officials gathered once more within the station's great council chambers. The atmosphere differed dramatically from the summit that had preceded the battle. Gone were many of the political performances and carefully crafted speeches. Too much blood had been spilled. Too many illusions had been shattered. Now the discussions focused upon a single question. Who was truly responsible? The answer arrived sooner than anyone expected. Garibaldi's investigation had accumulated an enormous archive of evidence over the previous months. Separately, Chiss intelligence services had uncovered their own disturbing discoveries. Republic analysts contributed intercepted communications. Even Count Dooku provided information that he had concealed for years. Individually, none of it proved anything. Together, the pieces formed a devastating picture. A hidden mastermind had manipulated both sides of the Clone Wars from the very beginning. Military campaigns that appeared independent connected through common directives. Political crises revealed coordinated influence. Strategic decisions consistently benefited one invisible figure while harming everyone else. The evidence pointed toward a conclusion so shocking that many initially refused to believe it. The Sith were involved. Not merely involved. Central. The war itself increasingly resembled a Sith creation. For Count Dooku, the implications proved impossible to ignore. He had always understood that Darth Sidious possessed ambitions beyond the Separatist movement. He had suspected manipulation. He had tolerated deception because he believed he could ultimately control events or benefit from them. Yet Babylon 5 had forced him to confront a reality he could no longer rationalize. He had been used. The Confederacy had been used. The Republic had been used. Entire civilizations had become pieces upon a game board designed by someone who cared nothing for their survival. For the first time since leaving the Jedi Order, Dooku felt genuine regret. Not regret for opposing the Republic. Regret for helping create the nightmare consuming the galaxy. Elsewhere, Obi-Wan Kenobi struggled with his own revelations. The evidence emerging from Babylon 5 confirmed fears he had long resisted acknowledging. The Republic was deeply compromised. Corruption extended farther than most Jedi understood. The war itself had transformed the Order into something increasingly distant from its original purpose. The Jedi remained defenders of peace. Yet peace had become secondary to military necessity. Babylon 5 exposed that contradiction mercilessly. The station had accomplished more meaningful diplomacy in months than the Jedi had achieved through years of warfare. The realization hurt. Because it was true. Anakin Skywalker felt the impact even more deeply. Throughout the conflict, he had accepted countless sacrifices as necessary. Friends had died. Entire worlds had suffered. Every tragedy became another justification for continuing the fight. Yet standing within Babylon 5's observation decks and looking out across reconstruction efforts involving former enemies, he found himself questioning assumptions that once seemed unshakable. What if the war truly had been manipulated? What if victory had never been the goal? What if the Jedi and the Republic had been marching toward disaster while believing they were preserving order? The questions haunted him. More importantly, they weakened something that Darth Sidious had spent years cultivating. For perhaps the first time, Anakin began seeing the Chancellor differently. Not as a mentor, not as a friend, as a politician whose influence appeared increasingly suspicious. On Coruscant, Palpatine sensed the shift immediately. The danger had become acute. His plans depended upon timing. Every stage required precise conditions. The Senate needed to remain frightened. The Jedi needed to remain distracted. Anakin needed to remain emotionally vulnerable. The Clone Wars needed to continue. Babylon 5 threatened every requirement simultaneously. The peace movement gained momentum daily. Evidence of manipulation continued spreading. Questions multiplied. Worst of all, Anakin was beginning to doubt. Sidious understood that hesitation now risked everything. Order 66 had originally been intended for a later stage of the war. Now he considered accelerating the timetable. The possibility carried enormous risks. Conditions remained imperfect. The Republic was not yet fully prepared for transformation into the Empire. Many military leaders remained uncertain. Public opinion had become increasingly influenced by Babylon 5. Executing the plan too early could trigger resistance before his position became secure. Yet waiting might prove even more dangerous. For the first time in decades, the Dark Lord found himself reacting rather than controlling. The situation deteriorated further when key Republic senators began openly advocating ceasefire initiatives inspired by Babylon 5's success. Several major Separatist systems expressed interest in direct negotiations. Neutral worlds offered mediation support. Even some military commanders quietly welcomed the possibility of ending hostilities. The war machine started slowing. Not stopping, but slowing. Every reduction in violence represented a threat to Sidious's future. Then came the decisive moment. A coalition of investigators from multiple factions completed the final stage of their analysis. Information recovered during the battle combined with older intelligence records produced a discovery so explosive that secrecy became impossible. Several financial networks linked directly to Palpatine's administration displayed connections to operations benefiting both sides of the war. The evidence remained circumstantial, but the implications were devastating. For the first time, suspicion reached the Supreme Chancellor himself. Not publicly. Not yet. But among influential leaders, doubts emerged. Sidious realized the game was ending. He could still seize power. He could still unleash Order 66. He could still attempt to force events toward the Empire. Yet success was no longer guaranteed. Babylon 5 had changed too much. Trust existed where hatred should have remained. Communication existed where isolation once prevailed. Questions existed where obedience had flourished. Most importantly, alliances had formed beyond his control. The final confrontation occurred not through massive fleets or climactic duels but through politics, exposure, and choice. As pressure mounted, Count Dooku made a decision that altered galactic history forever. He revealed everything he knew. Not every secret, not every detail, but enough. Enough to confirm the existence of Darth Sidious. Enough to expose years of manipulation. Enough to shatter confidence in the narrative sustaining the Clone Wars. The consequences proved immediate. Separatist worlds demanded answers. Republic leaders launched investigations. The Jedi Council began examining evidence with unprecedented urgency. Palpatine's carefully constructed position started collapsing. The process was chaotic, messy, dangerous, but irreversible. Faced with losing everything, Sidious attempted one final gambit. He accelerated plans already in motion and sought to trigger a crisis large enough to restore fear and justify emergency powers. This time, however, the galaxy was watching. Babylon 5 had taught its citizens to question appearances, to investigate narratives, to seek dialogue before conflict. The crisis failed. The momentum toward peace survived. Not perfectly, not universally, but enough. The Clone Wars did not end with the rise of the Empire. They ended through exposure, negotiation, compromise, and the collective realization that billions had suffered because too few questioned the stories they were told. Years later, historians would debate exactly how much Babylon 5 changed history. Some argued the station merely accelerated trends already developing. Others claimed it prevented the darkest future imaginable. Many believed it represented the single most important diplomatic intervention in modern galactic history. What remained undeniable was the outcome. The Republic survived, though profoundly reformed. The Jedi Order avoided destruction, though it emerged humbled and transformed by painful lessons. The Separatist movement achieved political concessions without total victory or annihilation. Count Dooku vanished from public life, becoming one of history's great mysteries. And Darth Sidious never became emperor. His grand design, crafted across decades, had been defeated not by superior power or military conquest but by something he never truly understood. People choosing cooperation over fear. As Babylon 5 continued orbiting among the stars, diplomats, merchants, explorers, and travelers passed through its corridors every day. New conflicts emerged. New challenges appeared. Peace remained imperfect, fragile, and difficult. Yet whenever leaders doubted its possibility, they remembered the station that appeared from another reality during the darkest days of the Clone Wars. The station that convinced enemies to speak. The station that exposed deception. The station that changed the future of a galaxy far, far away. And because of that station, history followed a different path than destiny had intended. The battle for Babylon 5 became the moment history divided into two separate paths. In one future, the future Darth Sidious had spent decades constructing through manipulation, fear, and carefully orchestrated war, the Republic would collapse beneath its own exhaustion. The Jedi Order would be shattered. The Empire would rise from the ashes. Billions would accept tyranny because they believed there was no alternative. But Babylon 5 had introduced something Palpatine never anticipated. Across the station's vast diplomatic chambers, species from two entirely different galaxies had demonstrated that enemies could sit at the same table without immediately reaching for weapons. Republic senators had spoken with Separatist leaders. Jedi Masters had exchanged ideas with alien philosophers who viewed destiny not as a path imposed by cosmic forces but as a responsibility earned through wisdom. Mandalorian warriors had fought beside former rivals. Smugglers, merchants, diplomats, and soldiers had discovered. Common interests stronger than political propaganda. Most importantly, the truth had emerged. The galaxy learned that someone had been manipulating both sides of the Clone Wars from the beginning. Evidence recovered by Garibaldi and Babylon 5 intelligence networks spread across thousands of systems. While Palpatine's deepest secrets remained hidden, enough information surfaced to create doubt. Citizens who once blindly supported the war began questioning its purpose. Senators demanded investigations. Military leaders began looking beyond official explanations. For the first time in years, Darth Sidious lost control of the narrative. The Clone Wars did not end overnight. Too much blood had already been spilled. Too many grievances remained unresolved. Yet the momentum toward endless conflict had been broken. Babylon 5 endured. Damaged but alive, the station remained in orbit as a permanent symbol of what cooperation could accomplish. Representatives from countless worlds continued arriving to negotiate disputes, exchange knowledge, and explore possibilities beyond warfare. It became neither Republic territory nor Separatist territory. It belonged to everyone willing to pursue peace. The Jedi Order survived stronger than it otherwise would have. Exposure to new philosophies forced many Jedi to confront their own weaknesses and assumptions. Some traditions changed. Others evolved. The Order became more adaptable, less isolated from the galaxy it served. As for Palpatine, his ultimate victory slipped further away than ever before. In the shadows, the Sith Lord remained dangerous. His ambitions had not vanished. His plans had not completely failed. But now the galaxy was watching. And because Babylon 5 had appeared during the Clone Wars, the future would never unfold exactly as Darth Sidious intended. Sometimes the greatest weapon is not a fleet, an army, or a superweapon. Sometimes it is simply a place where enemies are forced to see one another as people. And that changed everything.
The multiverse doesn't end here. New invasions, new empires, and new worlds collide daily. If you enjoy deep cinematic, what-if scenarios like this, subscribe and join Multiverse Galaxy if